The story I want to tell you is full of sadness and heartache. I started out life in poverty, living with my parents in a house that had some wooden floors and mostly dirt floors. My mother has a long list of mental issues and my father was an alcoholic and thankfully not the abusive type. Me and my sister were taken from our home when I was 7 and she was 4. We got placed into the foster care system in Kentucky. I'm not going to use real names, but I will use the initials of their names. It's my understanding at the time, foster parents in Kentucky could have up to 4 kids per room. And they didn't have a limit of how many a single foster parent could keep. Linda's home was a longhouse with 6 bedrooms and she was keeping at least 8 kids at a time. In the foster care system it's not uncommon to see a child stay with us just for a week and then be released back to the family, so we had different kids come and go all the time. The foster home we went to was ran by a woman we'll call Linda. And she was a widow. Her husband had passed away in the 80s. She had 4 ex-sons and 1 ex-daughter. Her youngest son we'll call Jay. Was still living with her because he had fallen from a truck when he was a kid and damaged his skull. This caused him to have a learning disability and he couldn't read or write, and at the time of me living with them he was about 26 years old. Her other son Chase was the oldest and he was a plumber. Another son is Dean and he owned 5 large farms and ran a grocery store. The 4th son was Cody and he died in the 80s from being shot. Her only daughter was Sandy and she was very kind to us. When we entered the foster care system it was a really scary time for us, and I'll never forget the screams of our parents as they ripped us from our home. Because we didn't have running water and electricity. The old barn converted into a house wasn't suitable for children. According to our social worker, when I first arrived I had broken my wrist and had my arm in a cast. The first thing we did was go shopping for clothes as I didn't bring any with me. When we returned from shopping I put my things away and was then given a trash bag. And told to go outside and not come back in until all of the loose trash was picked up. Just to let you know. Now, this was more of a work camp instead of a loving and caring home. While I was picking up trash, Jay was in the swimming pool they had beside the home. He yelled for me to come to him and he asked me if I wanted to swim. I told him I didn't know how to swim and I can't because of my obvious broken arm. He then grabbed me and tossed me into the pool and I screamed for help. I really felt like I was going to die that day. He took his time but jumped in and pulled me out. He told me to stop crying as if I would have drowned. No one would have cared because I didn't matter. I remember his words like it was yesterday. When I finally got to bed that night I couldn't sleep. And I cried the whole night missing my parents. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a hard 12 years of life to come. When I first arrived I was told by Linda that another boy will be sharing my room with me and he was away at camp for the week. I arrived at her house when school was out for the summer. His real name wasn't Ben at all and we'll call him Ben. Ben had been in the home for a while and he was about to turn 18, and when you turn 18 the foster care system lets you go as you're an adult now. When he returned from camp he was a very large guy, and I'm guessing about 6 feet 2 inches and 230 plus pounds. When I first met him things seemed to be fine, but it was the first night of him being back that he tried to molest me. I have a hard time sleeping as it is because every day I wanted to leave and be back with my parents. He got up from his bed that's on the other side of the room and then got into mine. He tried to force his penis into my mouth. He held my nose shut so that I couldn't breathe and I had no choice but to open my mouth. As he did this I did bite him as it was the only thing I could think to do. He jumped off of me and smacked me so hard it knocked me out as I don't remember anything else. The next morning when I got up with my face hurting and my mouth busted I ran to tell Linda what he did to me. She took me into her bedroom to talk about it. And I told her everything. When she confronted him about it he said I was trying to steal his money. And he smacked me for it. I told her that's not true and he checked his wallet for his money and couldn't find it. He asked me for his money back. And Linda searched my pockets. She pulled out $20 and she knew I had no money. She told me I was going to be punished and made me scrub the front porch. Ben had put his money in my pocket after he knocked me out, and I have no idea what else might have happened to me during that time. That night I cried and was sitting by the bedroom door in fear of being hurt again. I did this for a few nights and didn't get any sleep hardly. I was falling asleep outside doing work and getting in trouble for it. One day I'm in my room playing with Hot Wheels another foster kid let me have. Ben walks in and closes the door and I just start screaming. He quickly jumps on me and covers my mouth, and Linda is outside doing something and doesn't hear me. He tells me if I scream again he's going to smack me again, and I'm only 7 with a broken arm. I really can't do anything. He spits into my mouth and makes me swallow it while he lays on top of me. I don't know what else would have happened to me because Linda came back inside and called for him to do something. This time I didn't lay and cry at all, I just laid in place thinking about what to do. I decide I'm not going to let him keep hurting me, so I go to the kitchen and sneak a fillet knife into my room and I put it under my pillow. That night he gets up and jumps into my bed. He told me to remember what will happen if I scream or resist. I tell him I understand. I slip the knife from under the pillow and hid it under the covers. He then pushes me down to his penis again, and that's when I let him have it. I slashed and cut him as many times as I could. He quickly disarms me and runs out of the room into the bathroom. Run to wake up Linda, and I told her what happened and she called 911. She told me not to say a word to the cops about what happened and to go back to bed. Ben and Linda told the cops he had been sleepwalking and he didn't mean to cut himself. She told me if I come out of my room and say anything the cops, they wouldn't believe me because I'm a liar. After this happened, Ben never came back and I don't know what happened to him, but I knew I wasn't going to ever let anyone do that to me again. A really shitty thing Linda did to me was force me to wash the bed and the carpet of all the blood from Ben. I had to scrub the bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom as punishment. Being told that you were worthless, didn't matter to anyone, you'll never be anything, was commonly said from Jay and Linda, as they used that to demoralize the kids. They treated all of the foster kids this way and would tell us we are lucky to be living with them, as this is the only way we wouldn't be in jail or dead. They told us if we ever left we would end up in and out of jail because we are just as worthless as our parents. Anytime any of the kids wanted to do any after-school event or even play sports, they would tell them they don't matter or will never be anything, so why waste the time now? I was also threatened to be put into a boys' home away from my sister if I ever told anyone about how Linda treated us. At a young age you don't know any better, sadly, and you're too scared to think otherwise. All of the boys worked the farms of Dean and we didn't get to bed until about 11 p.m. We got up every morning at 4 a.m. to do farm work with feeding cows, chickens, and pigs. After we finished our work in the morning, we had to quickly scramble to get cleaned up for school, as the bus arrived at 6:20ish a.m. every day. You never had time to do any school work after you got home because you had to eat and then get back outside. It made passing classes in school really hard because I only had the bus ride home to get my homework done. Dean had lots of tobacco farms, and as you can imagine, he was doing really well for himself because he had free labor all year long. Raising tobacco isn't an easy job by any means, and it's even harder when you're just a kid. This kind of life went on for the whole time I was at the home, and nothing ever got better. Remember that this foster home keeps boys and girls from all walks of life. Also remember that Linda's 20-something son Jay lives with her as well. One night I was up going to the bathroom when I could hear faint crying. The crying was coming from the girls' room, and I went to find out what was wrong. I opened the door to find Jay having sex with a girl that was about 16 years old or so. I ran to tell Linda, and he quickly ran out of the room after me. All of the noise woke Linda up, and Jay told her they caught me sneaking into the girls' room. At this point I'm about 10 years old or so, and I try to explain to her what happened. She told me I'm telling lies and I should be ashamed of myself. She told me Jay would never do such a thing and I was in serious trouble tomorrow. I talked with the girl on the school bus the next morning and she said it was her idea to have S#X. She told me she had been flirting with him and she was hungry for S#X. I told her I was going to tell the social workers and she said if I did she would claim it never happened. When I did get home I was punished to clean out this old crappy garbage bin they have behind the home and it was full of loose garbage from bags getting ripped. I talked with the girl on the school bus the next morning and she said it was her idea to have S#X. She told me she had been flirting with him and she was hungry for S#X. I told her I was going to tell the social workers and she said if I did she would claim it never happened. When I did get home I was punished to clean out this old crappy garbage bin they have behind the home and it was full of loose garbage from bags getting ripped. Later that week when we went to the social worker's office for our visitation with my parents I told the social worker what happened to the girl and she pulled me into a private room to talk about it. I told her everything that was happening. And she told me she'll stop by tomorrow after we get home from school for a surprise visit. What I found out later in life is that the social workers in my county hated conflict and paperwork, so they would always give the foster homes a heads up on visits. The next day when we arrived home her car was sitting in our driveway. When I walked in she took the girl out to her car to have a talk. While the social worker was away Linda tells me she knows what I've done and I'm going to wish I had never opened my mouth. The social worker comes back with the girl and sits in the living room with Linda, Jay, me and all of the other foster kids. She goes on to tell us the importance of telling the truth and makes an example out of me. She told the other kids not to tell lies like I do as it causes unneeded stress and issues for everyone. After she left Linda told me she's going to make me pay for this and it might not be today but one day, remember this phrase. When I turned 16 I had been in the foster care system for about 8 years and my parents finally signed us over to the state. My social worker told me she's going to place us in line to be adopted and we will be visiting with new parents in the following weeks. I was very heartbroken but I was also excited as I couldn't wait to get away from Linda and her family. Weeks go by and we never get to visit anyone and I started to get worried. One day Linda comes to school to pick us up and tells us we are getting adopted today. I was really confused because we hadn't met with anyone. We arrive at the social worker's office and go in with Linda. We go into a room where my parents are and paperwork is on the table. Because I was 16 I had to sign paperwork stating that I understood what was going on. The social worker tells me Linda is going to adopt us and I start crying on the spot. I tell them I would rather be dead than to be adopted by her and the social worker told me she understands my anger because I hate to obey rules. She was convinced that I was hating Linda because I was a rebel and the normal teenager who hated following rules at this age. I told her that's not true and she said she knows it to be true and she doesn't want to hear me tell any more lies. My parents are both crying and they have already signed the paperwork weeks ago. Linda signs hers and I refuse to sign mine. The social worker told me if I don't sign it, it doesn't change anything as I'll still be adopted by Linda. The social worker told me if I don't sign it, it doesn't change anything as I'll still be adopted by Linda. On the way home from the social worker's office Linda looks up in the mirror and gives me a long gaze that I'll never forget. She then says, I told you one day you'll pay for what you've done and that day has arrived. I felt chills run down my spine and I was really in complete shock. Even as I type this out now I still get that same chill running down my spine and I can see her eyes glaring at me in the mirror. Now that she adopted me and my sister we were no longer protected by the foster care system. With foster kids, you're not allowed to lay a hand on them to discipline them and now that we are adopted that's out the window. Now, more abuse starts that we never had before. Now when Linda gets mad she would throw things at me, hit me with coffee cups, remote controls, chairs, or anything else she could get her hands on. Jay then began to beat me like I was a man when I talked back to him. Or not doing what he said the second he said it. At this point I felt broken and alone. My sister was treated like a princess and it's because she arrived at the home when she was 4, so she only knows Linda as her only parent and always did what she commanded. My sister at the time had no real understanding of who Linda was and how awful her family was. My sister was over the moon about being adopted and having Linda's last name. My sister was basically brainwashed into thinking Linda could do no wrong and that I was just a troublemaker. I felt like I had lost the only family I had. She was my everything and I sacrificed so much because I never wanted to be separated from her. My grand plan in life was to turn 18 and go live with my parents. Away from Linda and her family. It wasn't long after I was adopted that my father was diagnosed with cancer in his throat. I was crushed by this news as my father was my hero. I was only with my parents until the age of 7, but they truly loved us and provided for us the best they could. My parents had never raised a hand to us growing up and treated us with the love kids need. My sister and I had monthly visits with our parents while in foster care and never missed any of them. We would get dropped off at the social worker's office where our parents would walk with us to the local park and play. They didn't have a car or anything and used a local program for people in poverty to get access to transportation. We had a local program ran by the county that would pick people up and drive them to the grocery store, doctor visits, and court. It was like Uber, but it was limited as to where they would take you and how often. My uncle is helping my parents the most that he can and he takes my father for all of this chemo treatments. He is also coming to Linda's to pick us up to go and see my parents. At this point we're doing home visits with my parents as it's not easy for my father to travel. My father has been fighting with cancer for little over a year at this point. One day we are home for a visit with my father and he's in really bad shape. While he was gone for a chemo treatment, someone broke into his house and stole all of his pain medication. My uncle tried to get the medication refilled and was turned away because they didn't have a police report. My father knew who stole the pills and didn't want to turn him in as cops to poor people is the enemy. I was in art class and was called to the front office to take a call. My uncle had called to tell me my father tried to commit suicide and he's being transported to the hospital. He told me he was on his way to pick me and my sister up to go see him. My father lasted a few days and passed away from his liver shutting down. I was able to see him before he died and he could squeeze my hand to let me know he could understand me. I made sure to tell him how much I loved him and I promised to make him proud. I'm telling this part of the story because of how Linda and her family treated me afterwards. My father are lazy people who draw a check every month paid for by working people. They said it's a good thing he's dead and now my mother needs to drop dead as she draws a check too. They told me this on the way home from the hospital. I sit in the main back of the van in silence and not shedding a tear. I was no longer going to let them control me and keep me down. I made a promise to myself that I will do everything in my power to be better than them and one day I would show them what my pain feels like. My father passed away on October 25, 12 days before I would turn 18 on November 7. My mother was soon after awarded to the state and placed into a nursing home due to her mental issues. The day after we put my father to rest, I started working with my uncle painting barns and sealing driveways. When I lived with my parents, I missed too much school when I was in the first grade and failed. So getting out of high school I would be 19 years old. I had plans to go to Houston, Texas and learn underwater welding as that's where the money was. My uncle was paying me even on days we didn't find any work to make sure I had enough money to make it on my own. I had saved up about $1,200 and graduated high school. My uncle had paid a driver to take me and Linda down to TX. Linda had to go with me because I under the age of 25 and she had to sign paperwork stating she wouldn't be helping me with any student loans. We set out for TX and we are driving her van as my uncle's truck had broken down the day before and he only had his huge work truck that wouldn't be feasible to take. We get about 4 hours into the trip and Linda is getting frustrated. She told us she's tired of being in the van and she no longer wants to do this. She orders the driver to pull over in the next city. He does as she says because it's her van and she kicks me out onto a sidewalk. I have a bag of cloths and $1,200 in my pocket. They then take off and I watch them drive away and I keep watching for a few moments to make sure they are not coming back. I felt a relief sensation rush over my body. I'm free. I'm finally free. Of course this isn't where I wanted to be at, as 4 hours south of Kentucky. Isn't TX at all. I picked up my bag and walked up the sidewalk and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I could get a bus ticket and make my way down to TX, but I don't have the first idea where a bus station is. Please understand that I had never been outside of my hometown before this. I had never even met a person of any other race before. All I've ever done was go to school and work on a farm. I had no real education and hardly made it out of school. I come across a school in a shopping center and I decided to check it out. The school isn't even around today and was shut down because it a for-profit school that gave you no value, and of course I had no idea at the time. I walk in and talked out with the front desk about getting info on the school. She sends me to talk with a lady in admissions and I explain to her my situation. She tells me how I can get funding to go here and how she can get my housing tonight. They had a school housing program where they would put 4 students in a 2-bedroom apartment. She had me forge Linda's signature on paperwork about financial aid. I go to this 2-year college and get an associate's degree in computer science. I start working for a major computer company right out of college. I save every dime I can and only spend money when I need to. I buy my first truck with cash a year after starting at my job. I was still keeping tabs on my sister back in Kentucky. At this point my sister is about to get married and I'm going to walk her down the aisle at the church. Linda always took us to growing up. Please understand that Linda is a big figure at her church and well respected. This is important to understand for later. I drive up the weekend of the wedding and get a hotel room. About an hour outside of where we grew up. My sister's best friend in the world, and that's even true today, calls me and will call her Korea. She tells me that my sister's fiancé is abusive to her and she wants to call the wedding off, but Linda told her she couldn't and not to embarrass her at the church. Linda knows that he's abusive to my sister and has told her she needs to obey him as he will be her husband. On the day of the wedding I walk my sister down the aisle like normal. The pastor does his thing and says some words and whatnot, then comes the part where he asks if anyone thinks they shouldn't be married. They must speak now. This is where I stand up and say, I object to my sister being married to an abusive drunk. You could hear a pin drop for a moment and Linda's face is blood red. I then go on to say how Linda had known about the abuse and told my sister she was going to get married no matter what and not to embarrass her here today. Linda then loudly exclaims that I'm a known liar and everyone knows they can't believe a word I say. The pastor at this point asks me to please leave and my sister spoke up for me, telling everyone that what I had said was the truth, and we ran out of the church together. Linda was later removed from the church management and asked to please not come back to the church as they don't believe in abuse. I know what you're thinking. Oh man, I wish I could have been in the pastor's office to hear this conversation and to see the look on her face. After all of this happened, my sister moved in with Korea where she would later meet her husband. It had been about 7 years now from the wedding crash. I'm now married and I have a house of my own and living a great life. My sister had married a real man who treats her right and they have a great little girl together. Korea is now working at the county courthouse and does a lot of work with properties and taxes. She calls me one day to tell me Linda's property tax is way behind and they didn't get the tax lien lifted and now they will have a tax deed sale of the property. I knew this was my time to strike and pay them back for a fraction of the pain they had caused me. I show up at the auction and the only other person to show up was Jay and his wife. When he noticed me he turned pale and then tried to be all buddy-buddy with me. I was very friendly and he asked me why I'm here. I tell him it's to help keep the property in the family and I had no problem helping out. I let him know if I get ownership I'll pay the taxes for them. So they won't need to worry about this being a problem ever again. His brother Dean had given him the money needed to purchase the property back, so he had cash with him to pay for the taxes and fees. I told him to keep the cash and let them know you took care of the taxes. So the bidding starts at a little over $2,000 because of the back due taxes and fees. I bid on it and Jay doesn't. I easily win and now have instant ownership of the property. I go down to the courthouse with Jay and I finish all of the paperwork with Korea. Linda had fallen behind on the property taxes because she was giving the money to Jay to pay it. Well, it turns out Jay is what we call a pillhead and was using the money to buy drugs. Linda didn't keep foster kids anymore because of her age. She wasn't allowed to, so they didn't have any money coming in besides disability and SSI. When I arrived to the house I told Linda how I regret being a horrible child and now that I'm older I've grown out of it. I let her know how much of a mother she was to me when I didn't have one and that I was here to pay her back. I told her now that I own the property she'll never need to worry about property taxes ever again. I let her know I'm going to remodel her house but she can't live in it at the same time. I told her this works out, because I won the bid, the county would automatically evict them. Linda is a person who thinks we've never been to the moon, so tricking her into believing me was easy. She told me she could stay at Dean's house while I'm remodeling hers, and she was very excited. I told her not to worry about any of the belongings they have, as I'll make sure they are covered up and moved when needed. I tell her a lawyer will be sending some paperwork over to her in a few days. I then hire a lawyer to do an ejectment of Linda and Jay from the property. I don't know if I could have done this a different way, but this was the advice I was given at the time. It took about 2 months for everything to be fully mine and them evicted. With them evicted, and now that all the belongings have stayed in the house past 30 days, I now own all of it. I got in contact with the local fire department to find out what I needed to do in order to burn a house down on my property. They informed me that it has to be a controlled burn. I'll need a permit to close off the road, as the home sits near a public road, and I had to have the water shut off and the power disconnected. The water was easy, but it took a while for the power because they had to remove all the wires running to the pole and remove the transformer. The fire department gave me a date and time I was allowed to do the burning, and I coordinated with the sheriff's office to close the road. I got my permit from the city, and now I just had to sit and wait. The day of the Great Fire, I prepped the house with lots of straw inside, and I made sure to take all of the doors down and open all of the windows, as I wanted this to burn as fast as possible. I go to Dean's house to visit Jay and Linda. I told them I wanted to take them out by the old oak tree for lunch. This tree was in a field across the road from the home. When we worked on the farm, we would eat lunch in the summer under the shade of this tree. Linda is in a wheelchair, and Jay has a bad back, so he doesn't move around too well and almost needs a wheelchair. Drop them off, and I tell them to enjoy the snacks, and I'll be right back, as I'm going to set fire to the old stuff I ripped out of the house. It's really common for people where we live to burn trash. I called the fire department to let them know I was going to start the fire and made sure they had the address. I met with the officers closing the road off, let them know I was about to begin and they might encounter some family members trying to get by them and not to let them. I then went behind and started fires from under the house with packed straw. I'm standing beside them while they eat and chat with me about life and what I've been doing with my career. It's not too long before the fire starts to peek around the sides of the home. They start screaming about the fire and we need to call 911. This is when I told them I had the road closed and the fire department already knew that I was going to burn my house down on my property. I told them what they are seeing is just a fraction of the pain they had caused me over the course of my life, and I want them to know what a fraction of my pain feels like, as I could never fully make them understand. At this point, Jay is trying to call his brothers, and I reminded him I have the road closed and they can't get by. It takes less than 20 minutes for the house to collapse into a heap of junk. The whole time I'm watching them as they sit and sob. Jay tries to fight me and I would just move away from him as he's high and can't really move well anyway. About 30 minutes has passed and the fire gone with just smoke and embers glowing. I get in my car and drive back home knowing that they have now lost almost everything they have. They didn't lose as much as I have, but it was the closest thing to it. Linda passed away in 2010 and Jay lives with his wife in an old trailer somewhere. I still own the property today and refuse to sell it to anyone because I don't want them to ever have the chance of owning the property again. I go back every year to check on the property to make sure they haven't moved a trailer on it or something on my land. From my understanding, the property was in the family for more than 100 years. I haven't talked to any of them and never plan to. What I want is anyone reading this to take away that abuse is never okay, ever. If you're being abused, do not listen to the people abusing you. They will lie and put you down to hold control over you. If you can help anyone that you know that's being abused, please help them get help.